Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge. 3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go. The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today. Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire. Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again. Made it to the top of East Dix. Peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the Dix Range. Avalanche Pass. On top of Rocky Peak Ridge. It's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8. Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18. Gothics, number 22. Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack 46er. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. August 3rd, 2018. Just a mere 5 days after I swore I was taking a few weeks off from hiking following my 27-mile, 17-hour day where I summited Marcy, Skylight, and Gray, along with the spontaneous addition of Cliff and Redfield. I was back at the Adirondack Lodge again, this time to hit fan favorite Mount Colden and the often confusing, unmaintained trail of Mt Marshall. It was a Friday morning and I was leaving to start my next movie Sunday, so I had to squeeze in as many days on the trail as I could, since I didn't know how often I would be able to hike on the weekends over the next few months. So the mountains were calling, and I answered. My plan for the day was to revisit the same trail I was just on 5 days prior, from the lodge to Marcy Dam, then take the Avalanche Pass Trail to the Lake Arnold Trail, up to the L. Morgan Porter Trail, which would take me to the summit of Colden. Then I would go down the other side of Colden via the Colden Trail back to Avalanche Pass at the shores of Lake Colden. I would take a left and walk around the lake where I'll eventually take another left onto the Calamity Brook Trail just after the wooden bridge at the edge of the lake. Then a right at the cairn for the Herbert Brook Trail, which I would take to the top of Mount Marshall. Back down via the Herb Brook Trail, I planned to take the Lake Colden Trail along the lake until it eventually met up with the Avalanche Pass Trail, which I would take all the way back to Marcy Dam, and then the Van Hovenberg Trail back to the lodge per usual. So that was my itinerary for the day. Since I was familiar with exactly how the first 2 hours of my hike would go, having just done that same portion of the hike 5 days ago, I decided to start extra early today. I also wanted to finish at an earlier time because I was leaving home soon, so I wanted as much time at home with the family as I could get. And due to the typical pre-solo hike jitters I always have the night before a solo hike, I barely slept as I thought about the hike and my route and all of that, so it made it all the more easy to wake up at about 2 a.m. this time. And I was out the door and signed in at the lodge at 3:30 a.m. Definitely the first person signed in on this day. I turned on my headlamp and I began hustling down the trail towards Marcy Dam. Through the woods, over the bridges, destroying spiderwebs and the sounds of the Adirondack woods in the middle of the night all around me. I knew from the previous hike that the trip to the Morgan Porter Trail up Colden would be exactly 2 hours, so I anticipated this whole portion to be in the dark, and it was. I crossed over Marcy Dam, went right again onto Avalanche Pass, where I traveled along the Marcy Brook until I landed at some campsites at the Lake Arnold Trail Junction, where I'm pretty sure I startled some campers not expecting to hear someone coming down the trail at that hour. I saw the flashlights turn on in the tent, and I could hear someone whispering, "Is somebody outside? What do you think?" So I quickly got out of there, I took the left and began the trail up the long, constant, but not too steep, but very constant elevation gain of the Lake Arnold Trail. This part of the trail involves almost all rock hopping and is one long, constant grade going up. Not too bad. But today was a cloudy, misty day, so I had to take my glasses off again, similar to when I hiked Giant and Rocky Peak Ridge, because hiking in humid weather with my glasses always fogging along the way and trying to see a headlamp never seems to work very well. Much clearer now. Kind of. I finished the climb up to the wooden planks at the Colden Trail Junction at Lake Arnold almost to the same second as it took me 5 days prior. Really crazy. There was only a 5-second difference. Literally 5-second difference. Pretty wild. It took 2 hours to this point, putting me at 5:30 a.m. The sun was starting to come up, but not quite yet as it was still relatively dark in the woods. I took the right and began my trip up Mount Colden, a mountain a lot of people tend to save for their number 46, but for me today it would be number 33. Scottie Pippen's number, the ultimate sidekick. This trail up Colden is a nice gradual trail through the woods, climbing up some slabs, nothing too difficult. Since the earlier portion of the Lake Arnold Trail has you gaining so much elevation gradually, it puts you at an advantage when you get to this trail. So I started hiking up, through the woods, up some slabs, through the woods, and just before I had another slab climb, I decided I needed to take a breather for a minute and eat a peanut butter and jelly because I could feel the hunger in my stomach. I was trying to wait to the summit, but decided I needed to refuel at that point. So after a 5-minute break or so, I hurried up the slab and quickly came out to what I thought was the summit. Nice and open rock, very peaky, but as I walked around I thought, that mountain next to me looks like the summit of Colden. I don't think I'm there yet. And I was right. It was a false summit of sorts. It took me a minute or two to find the right trail over this rocky portion, which was right back where I came out of the woods. I must have just not noticed the yellow paint trail markers on the rock because I had that, oh, I'm at this summit, yes, let's go look around excitement. Prematurely, of course. At this point, it was 6:15 a.m., 45 minutes since making it to the Colden Trail Junction. So I found the trail and I continued up to the real summit of Colden, which wasn't too bad of a hike up at this point. It only took about 15 minutes or so from that point, and it landed me there at the summit at 6:30 a.m., exactly 3 hours from signing in at the lodge, and an hour from the trail junction. Mount Colden. I was now on top of one of the most iconic mountains in the high peaks. Colden has an elevation of 4,714 feet, the 11th tallest high peak for number 33. It has a cool summit, huge massive views, a great spot to hang out on for a while. It was cloudy on this day, so I'd say my views were about a 6 out of 10. So not terrible, but not spectacular either. What is cool on Colden, however, and unique is seeing the valley below with Lake Colden and Avalanche Lake. It's a super cool vibe. I will say, though, the summit wasn't quite as awesome as I thought it would be in my head, and Josh told me he had the same thought the first time he went up there. It's one of those mountains that's cooler to look at from other peaks, but not as amazing up top on that actual summit. I expected a little more, but it was still cool. I hope to do the Trap Dyke next summer with a buddy of mine who finished his 46 on it. I really want to do that, but I don't want to do it alone. I'd much prefer to go up that with someone who's already tackled it, but it does seem quite fun. So since it was cloudy and humid and I had eaten a sandwich about 20 minutes prior, I only stayed up there for about 10 minutes, then I began my hike down the mountain via the Colden Trail towards the Avalanche Pass Trail and Lake Colden. This first part of the hike down as you head towards the tree line is awesome because you have the valley and the lake in front of you for a good chunk of time as you're hiking down. Massive and unique views with the lakes below. Good stuff. I eventually made it back to the tree line, and this trail down Colden is a constant elevation loss / gain, depending which way you're going on the trail. But I was going down, so elevation loss, and is mostly all slab climbing. Some dirt and woods trails, but a large portion is just a long slab. On this day it was very wet, so that made for a lot of slippery conditions coming down the trail. A few very close call slips and a lot of grabbing on roots as I go down. A lot of butt sliding. There's even an awesome portion of the trail with a huge wooden stair set going down the steep slab. Shout out to the trail crews who build those stairs, they're great. This trail would be a very fast one to ascend or descend on a dry day due to the slabs. You can pretty much run up it or run down it. But since it was super wet, it was quite slow. I soon was at the bottom at the lake and I went left to go around it. Stepping on rocks and boulders as the trail goes along the outskirts of Lake Colden, then I followed it around to the edge of the lake and eventually came to a wooden bridge at the tip of the lake, followed by a wooden ladder to climb up to the trail above. Great views down here of the lake with Mount Colden towering above on the right. Super cool. So I climbed the ladder and went left as I was heading towards Mt Marshall. This part of the trail even goes all the way to the upper works, so a lot of people come in via that direction to access these mountains, so I could have gone all the way there, but obviously that wasn't the plan. Not long after walking in the woods and along some rocks, I came to the cairn marking the beginning of the Herb Brook Trail, a herd path to the top of Mount Marshall. And just as I made it to the cairn, I passed my first humans of the day. 2 guys in their 20s who camped out there and they were planning to do Colden, Cliff, and Redfield, and Marshall if time allowed. That would definitely be a big day going all the way up and then all the way down and then all the way up and then all the way down and then all the way up and all the way down for number 4. Doing that for 3 or 4 mountains is definitely a big day. We had a little chat about the mud that awaited them at the beginning of Cliff. I was obviously still a little bitter, a little salty about that mountain. Cliff Mountain, maybe one day we'll be friends, but it definitely wasn't going to be today. So I started up the herd path, which I was very cautious about not zoning out on this trail because Josh had warned me that this mountain can be a little confusing, so really focus on the trail. And I remembered the older gentleman that I met on my last hike telling me a story of how he got lost on Mount Marshall and never made it to the summit. He clearly went on the wrong trail at some point. And this was a guy with tons of hiking experience, having hiked over 40 of the high peaks and all 48 of the whites in New Hampshire. So I was glad to have heard him tell me that because these warnings kept me extra focused on the trail today. The majority of this trail, like many, runs along the brook, so if you do get lost, check the map and know where the brook is. Probably head towards it. With that in mind, the trail has the typical exposed routes from all the foot traffic and all that fun. Lots to slip on. And the trail is the typical winding in and out of the woods with some muddy sections, but overall it's not too bad. I was very vigilant when I came to a trail junction to check the map to verify which direction to go because I didn't want to end up on the wrong trail like happens often on this peak. Fortunately, there was only one trail junction that wasn't super obvious which way to go because both ways at this junction felt correct. But I made the right choice, and then I made it up to the Mount Marshall wooden summit sign at 9:50 a.m. Just under 6.5 hours into my day, and a total ascent time of 1 hour and 15 minutes. Mount Marshall, named after original 46er brother Robert Marshall, stands at 4,360 feet elevation. It has a mostly wooded summit with some small views at various points up there. Not the most popular hike for views, though. I had packed another sandwich, so I took off my backpack and refueled for the long walk back to the lodge that awaited me. While I was up there, I remembered a friend of mine telling me about a plane crash site on or near Mount Marshall, but I had no idea where it was, so I didn't go looking around. But it's definitely something to keep in mind when you're planning this hike, since I've seen photos and it seems pretty cool. Eerie, but cool still nonetheless. That plane crash was on August 10th, 1969, and today was August 3rd, 2018. So a week from today would have marked 49 years since that plane crashed. Some backstory on that: the pilot survived the crash, thankfully, however with a body full of broken bones, but he did survive due to the plane landing in a small grove of pine trees and missing some boulders that would have likely caused a very different ending. I've looked up information on how to find the plane crash site, something I'll do in the future, but I'll share it with you here if you're planning on adding that to your day. And this information is from peterkbrandon.com. So thanks for the info, peterkbrandon.com. Quote, peterkbrandon.com. The plane crash itself is located not more than 100 feet off a rarely hiked trail called the Indian Pass Trail. This trail can be difficult to follow at times as it is very overgrown and seldom traveled, especially in the off-season. Unfortunately, there is no specific marker for the plane crash, so it can be a bit tough to find. Basically, when you find yourself no longer ascending on the Indian Pass Trail and you reach the valley between Marshall and Iroquois, keep your eyes peeled for a large and distinct boulder sitting directly on the left side of the trail, assuming you're coming in from Lake Colden and the Avalanche Pass area. The plane crash is visible from behind the boulder if you look carefully, so if you can't find it very quickly, you should keep going until you reach another large boulder. And once again, that is from peterkbrandon.com. So, if you're interested, that should help you get started to find that plane crash in the valley between Marshall and Iroquois. I'll have to check it out sometime, but today wasn't the day. So I had summited both peaks for numbers 33 and 34, and it was time to head back home. It took me about an hour and 20 minutes to get back down the mountain, and I got to the cairn and went left towards Lake Colden, where I continued around the lake on the Lake Colden Trail. This trail goes along the lake and in the woods a ways, eventually passing the ranger outpost at Lake Colden. So if you're ever in need of help, there's typically someone there. Follow the Lake Colden Trail around the lake and you'll come to the cabin. Once past the lake and after passing the trail to go up the backside of Algonquin, the trail merges with Avalanche Pass. And this is all flat woods walking, so you can run it and make great time on it if you have the energy. It's very remote out here. Still no signs of other people yet today, just those two dudes at the base of Marshall I ran into. And once I got to the Avalanche Pass Trail, I knew this was taking me all the way back to Marcy Dam, so I was able to relax a little since I was on the trail that would take me back to familiar territory. This stretch of Avalanche Pass along Avalanche Lake is very scenic as well, as you have amazing views of Mount Colden's Trap Dyke, a view that I randomly remembered mid-stride and thought, crap, I forgot about the Trap Dyke, did I miss it? And then at that moment, I looked to my right and I was directly across the lake from it. Boom, there it was. I was right across the lake. Perfect spot for a photo. Super cool and a trail I need to tackle at some point. But I don't recommend doing it by yourself, and I don't recommend doing it with people who have never done it before if you do it. Do that trail with someone who's done it before. This trail also has the infamous hitch-up Matildas, as they're known, which are basically steel frames drilled into the side of Avalanche Mountain with wooden planks laid across the beams, forming a bridge, which is about 4 feet over Avalanche Lake, making a fun little foot